Vlog 29. Alright, today I'm going to talk about the law and legal system, something I don't know anything about. I am not a lawyer. I don't claim to be a lawyer. In fact, I don't know much about law, unfortunately. But I would like to talk about a Supreme Court ruling, United States Supreme Court ruling that was handed down yesterday, and it was between the Federal Communications Commission of government that regulates broadcast transmissions, public airwaves, things like that, and Fox, of all companies. And this is a lawsuit that has stemmed from the Bush administration that was kind of almost retroactively, years later after the fact, was enforcing stricter guidelines about indecency, about profanity that was uttered on a public station, a live TV, essentially. That was not bleeped, it went out. I think it was fuck or something like that was the word. And I think there was maybe a couple instances of it in the same award show, and Fox did not bleep them for whatever reason. I guess maybe it was really live, or they weren't on the ball enough, and it went out to the airwaves. And so the FCC was now fining them hundreds of thousands of dollars, like 4 years after the fact, and it was kind of a political maneuvering by Bush, said by some, because he needed to score points with his base or something like that, which of course his base is a lot of fundamentalist Christians who are extremely sensitive to profanity and other type of indecency type of ideas or images or language. And so they came down. The case was decided 5-4, very close as it can be. And generally the conservative justices supported the Bush administration FCC's guidelines, saying they weren't arbitrary or capricious. And the other more liberal justices in general said that for varying reasons, that the laws don't work and that they're arbitrary or that they're done for political reasons. So they were doing it the right way. So, fire truck. Anyway, so that's the ruling. So as best as I understand it, and if I'm wrong about this, please correct me. But anyway, but it leads me to this is a much broader issue. The reason why there's these holds on freedom of speech, this is a curtailing of freedom of speech. I mean, you should be able to say anything you want on television or any type of broadcast medium. In theory, I mean, the Constitution arguably protects against that. That's a part of a freedom of Bill of Rights, and so the FCC was created once they had these broadcast mediums like radio, like television, and the argument is that since these mediums are finite, there's only a certain spectrum allowed for there's only a certain number of radio stations that possibly can exist. There's only a certain number of television stations that possibly exist. Again, this is during the broadcast age, where this is the only game in town. The only way to disseminate these broadcast mediums essentially was through these finite wavelengths that are set aside for these type of broadcasts. And so the government's saying that since they are finite, and since therefore we can create censorship laws that prohibit certain types of behavior, nudity, sex, probably extreme gratuitous violence, and profanity. And so this has been the rules, I think, for quite a long time. I think for 50 years or so. And of course, media has changed. The internet has evolved. Cable television has now become one of the almost ubiquitous for the majority of Americans. And so, necessarily they do not have to follow these rules. But if you notice, on most basic cable stations, they do. There is no nudity. There is no profanities. You watch The Daily Show, they bleep out all the cuss words. And this is, I'm pretty sure, completely at will by the corporations themselves to either placate their advertisers or not to maybe incur the wrath of senators in making more laws that potentially could prohibit and censor them and make them expose them to fines and penalties and I guess possibly jail terms or something like that, if the law would stipulate that. Putting aside the free speech argument that I think would be made, that would be very hard to get those laws passed, probably it's done more for advertisers and everything. But to me, again, it goes back to the question of most laws and regulatory bodies, almost all anyway, are at the very core trying to prevent a harm to an individual or groups of individuals that are being hurt unfairly by the gains of the people doing the whatever broadcast indecency that they may be doing. And it's really largely, again, like a children's argument. It's for the children. It's not necessarily for adults. It's to protect the children. And I've seen studies where children watching, like, exposed to lots of porn, growing up and things like that, it affects their cognitive development of positive sexual, or not positive, but healthy sexual behavior, and it can cause problems like that. So I'm more speaking specifically, and I could be wrong about that, so I don't quote me on that, but that's what I've read. But more importantly, it's the profanity issue, and that does profanity in any way harm children? If they hear curse words, that somehow is damaging to them, and in a way that's fundamental, that should be stopped and should be curtailed, and other people should be prohibited from doing that for the sake of these children, which I've never heard any type of empirical argument that's ever made that. It's purely that people don't want it, and it makes a certain group of people uncomfortable. And that isn't necessarily a good argument to prohibit free speech and First Amendment rights. But that is what is exactly going on here. And the idea of something being indecent in and of itself, by kind of an arbitrary standard of words, the George Carlin 7 dirty words type spiel, which is much larger than that. It's much more than 7 dirty words. But anyway, the FCC does not publish, as far as I know, this is part of the Supreme Court decision, which surprised me when it came out with this, is they don't really provide a definitive explanation of what they are going to fine people for. There's kind of a general broad outline, a history of what they've done in the past, but they don't go out and out define it. And that's what part of the Supreme Court case was about, is this kind of arbitrary or loosely defined set of terms problematic, in terms of, again, not fair to the companies that are being fined, because they don't know exactly what they can and cannot do. Anyway, but I think the more important thing is that this is, again, I think, a conservative type issue that have real trouble with profanity. And I've seen this on YouTube to a lesser degree, but again, you see that it affects our culture in general, that profanity on a broadcast medium, whether it be on YouTube or on TV, that when you hear profanity, it's almost like it's shocking because it's something that's been prohibited. It's kind of like nudity in a way, and I don't want to make a one-to-one comparison here, but if nudity was much more common, it wouldn't be a big deal if you saw it. In the same way with broadcast media, profanity is that it wouldn't be a big deal, but it is, because we're kind of isolated from it to a certain degree, in a broadcast sense, not in a very casual person-to-person context. There's a lot of profanity, but I think it's different when you see someone else on TV doing it psychologically, that it's more important, or it carries more weight, or it's more of a taboo. And I think that is necessarily not a good thing, because, again, I kind of go back to this harm argument, that if you're really not harming anybody, then why is there a taboo opposed to just some type of social norms that an arbitrary group of people are enforcing on the society as a whole? And that's basically un-American. That's not what the Bill of Rights is stipulating. The Bill of Rights is to protect that, from arbitrary arguments that really are based not on fact, but just on personal opinion or someone's morals, without demonstrating harm. And that's what really bothers me. And I think you see this eke over into YouTube. Videos can be flagged for language, even taken down potentially. But again, where's the harm? And I want to know what people think of that. Is there harm? And two, why do we let these kind of guidelines affect what we do in the way we speak? Let's throw that out there. I've been thinking about this for years, and I've never really been able to come up with a good argument. So anyway, I've rambled long enough. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.